Hi everyone, welcome to Friends Together. So, this is going to be a several part series, so depending on which part you tune into, you may look at our YouTube channel and find more information. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and along with that, obviously, our nation is in the middle of talking a lot about sexual assault and what consent is and those sorts of things. And so, here we are. We're going to talk about, first in this video, we're going to talk about domestic violence and what it is and what it's not. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kathy Robinson Pickett. I'm the founder and executive director of Friends Together. We are an NGO that works in social justice issues, and domestic violence and sexual assault is one of those issues. I myself, most of you know, but in case you're tuning in from somewhere else, am a victim of a violent sexual assault by strangers. So not exactly what the conversation in the nation's about right now. That happened many years ago, and as a result, I'm HIV positive and have been for 34 years, so a long time. I am also, as a result of that trauma, a victim of domestic violence myself. I'm my first husband, the husband of my children. We were a couple when the assault happened and when we were diagnosed with the HIV. At that point, he had kind of cracked up a little bit, and alcohol became his substitute for everything else that he could find in his life, and our house became a kind of dangerous place to be. A really dangerous place for me to be, not for our children, but for me. And I stayed for a really long time. People always ask, why do you stay? Well, for as many victims as there are, male or female, there's that many reasons why people stay. For me, I stayed because I felt guilty and I felt responsible. Every place I spoke professionally around HIV and victims' rights and advocacy and those kinds of things, someone would say, how do you live with yourself knowing you infected your husband? And those kinds of messages over and over and over caused me to internalize feeling responsible, even though I had no control over any of that. At any rate, what made me leave is what's important. One day, he pushed me and a plate glass window broke, and I laid on the floor with glass on me. My kids were about 4 and 5, 3 and 4 and 5, I guess. And my son went into the bedroom, called for his sister, and I heard the door shut and push close. And in that moment, laying on the floor with the glass around me, I thought, my daughter is going to grow up and think this is the way she should be treated. And maybe on some level, even more importantly, my son's going to grow up and think this is the way it's okay to act. It was that push that finally pushed me to leaving. I still didn't get a divorce. I took care of him for a long time after that, but I left and I made sure my kids were gone. Other stuff led to finally getting a divorce. But at any rate, I share that with you because the national discussion often is, well, if it was really bad, someone would leave. If it was really this, somebody would go. There's not always those resources for people to be able to do that. A lot of times people don't even realize how bad the situation is until it escalates to a level that they can't leave. So in this first video, we're going to talk about what is domestic violence. Obviously, physical abuse we're pretty aware of. Now I should say I've been a certified domestic violence instructor for medical professionals since the about 95, I guess. So for many years I taught CE and CU programs and worked with shelters across the southeastern United States. So the first thing we're going to talk about is physical abuse. Most people think they know what physical abuse looks like, and you're right. If you see, again, we should back up. When we talk about domestic violence, the national discussion right now basically talks about spousal abuse or girlfriend-boyfriend abuse, and talks about the male being the perpetrator. Well, first off, abuse can go both ways. Females can be perpetrators as well as males. Domestic violence is a much bigger thing than a husband beating up his wife. It involves elder abuse, child abuse, dating abuse, When I talk about domestic violence in relationships, I mean people that are partnered, whether they're legally married or not, whether they're straight or gay, whatever that is, okay? So let's look at the big picture before we go into the little picture, okay? So physical abuse, most people feel like, oh, well, I know what physical abuse is. I can see that. There's bruises, there's this, there's that. What I'll say is, whether we're talking relationship abuse or child abuse, elder abuse, if you see bruises here, out in the open, then you have one of two kinds of perpetrators. Either you have a perpetrator who's faced no consequences, is no longer worried about anything that could happen repercussion-wise for them being an abuser. Or you have a serial perpetrator. This may be the first time they've perpetrated against this victim, but they've done it before. Perpetrators do not want to get caught. They hit you places where people can't see it. They bruise you places where people can't see it. Dan would pull my ear. He would pull the hair on the back of my neck. One time he punched me, and that was right in my kidneys. Again, places where no one can see it. The worst case of physical abuse I've ever been called to kind of interact in was years ago. I was teaching one day at Holmes Regional Medical Center in Melbourne, and I had a pager. Yes, before cell phones. And my pager was going off 911, 911. When I called, it was a shelter in the state, and they were asking me to please come. And it was a long way away from where I was, so I said, can I come tomorrow? And they said, no, we really need you to come when you're done today. So I did. When I was done teaching, I got in my car, drove several hours. When I arrived at the shelter, this beautiful woman, stately woman, very sophisticated looking, dressed very well, Caucasian, very well spoken woman was the person who was the victim. She had her young daughter, teenage daughter, with her. Her story was that she had been married to a fairly prominent, very prominent, fairly famous plastic surgeon in California. For the last 4 or 5 years of her marriage, he would restrain her at night, and he would put needles under her fingernails and under her toenails. What made her leave was he began doing it to their teenage daughter. What made her run was that when she went to court, he hired a psychiatrist to say she was crazy. She had never told her priest, she had never told her friends, the daughter had never told anyone, yet they had calluses and scars that you could not make up. So what made her run was the judge awarded custody to him of their daughter. And so she had taken her daughter, and she was running as fast and as far as she could possibly run. They had called me because they wanted her to have HIV testing and some other stuff. So physical abuse, although we think we know, oftentimes we don't see it. Emotional abuse and verbal abuse kind of go hand in hand. Verbal abuse, we're all aware of it. You're ugly, you're idiot, you're fat. Nobody likes redheads. Your cooking is horrible. Those kinds of things. Emotional abuse usually goes hand in hand with that. And emotional abuse is withholding affection. It's a child brings home their report card. They have 4 A's and 1 B, and instead of going, woohoo, score, let's go to Dairy Queen and celebrate, someone goes, what did you do to get a B? It's that sort of thing, right? Emotional abuse and verbal abuse are oftentimes way worse in the long term. People that have been victims will tell you the scars of physical abuse heal. The emotional abuse leaves scars on the inside of you and your heart that take a long time and lots of nurturing to get better. It creates people's self-worth. It creates people's everything that they are, right? You can be walking through Walmart and you hear someone speaking to their children, and it puts that pit in the bottom of your stomach. That's emotional abuse. You know it when you see it, feel it, right? People get worn down to it, though, because people, especially people who maybe grew up in a home where people were not the best to each other, then when their spouse or their boyfriend or their girlfriend or whoever begins to treat them the same way, their self-worth just continues to go down, and yet they don't really realize that this isn't okay, that it's not the way people should be treated. Look what we have in the media right now. We have politicians calling people names, terrible names. We have all this other stuff. So imagine what's going on in teenagers' minds about what is right, what is wrong, how do you weigh that out? So emotional and verbal abuse are really huge. The next one I want to talk about is financial abuse. When we talk about financial abuse, normally we think of when there's a couple, one person taking all the money, giving you an allowance of $20 to buy groceries for a family of 4, controlling what bills they will pay, whether you have a phone, whether you have this, whether you have that. In my world, in the HIV world, financial abuse is very much about power and control. If you don't have the money to get gas in your car to go to the doctor, you're not going to get your meds. That's very much about keeping you alive. If you have a sick child and you have to do certain things to be able to get that money because they're not going to give you the gas money or they're not going to drive you or whatever, there's real power and control with that. But I really want to talk about an instance of financial abuse that occurred when I was working in an institution, a higher ed institution that will remain nameless. One day I was in my office and I ran a program, and students on campus, it was a small campus, and students on campus knew that I was a safe place to come. And this young man who I'd known fairly well on campus, he was a junior at this time, came into my office, which was an old, comfortable, historic-y kind of house with big, comfortable furniture. And this young man came in and he just dropped in the chair. And it was the week before Thanksgiving, and he just dropped in and he's like, Kathy, I just don't want to be a doctor. He was a biology pre-med, you know, his line was drawn out for him. His brother had graduated, gone to med school, his parents were doctors. His line was drawn out, right? I said, well, honey, you don't have to be a doctor. You get to be anything you want to be. That's the great thing. You're super smart. What do you want to be? And he says, well, I really am interested in mental health. I'm like, there's nothing. You're on the right track. Get this degree and, you know, whatever. And he's like, I can't. My parents will disown me. And I'm like, oh, honey, parents say all kinds of things. Your parents are not going to disown you if you say you don't want to go to med school. Well, for a few days, this kid came to my office, and I really started getting very, very concerned about his mental health and his stability. And so finally, I had convinced him that we should call his parents together. We'd have a call with his parents. I had another friend on campus that would come in who was a mental health person. We would call and we would bridge this before he was going to go home for the holiday, right? So dialing the phone number on my office phone, and I dialed the area code, and it's in the state of Florida, and I'm dialing the next numbers, and I'm on about the 4th number, and the kid says to me, hey, you know my mom hasn't practiced medicine since we were born, right? What? Your mom went to med school? You guys are in your 20s? What? And he's like, no, Well, that was probably information I should have had before I hit the last phone number, because obviously power and control was probably an issue in this home. But anyway, parents get on the phone. Mom doesn't say anything. Dad's on, and the kid starts talking to his dad. His dad just basically shuts down. He says, that's fine. Your stuff will be on a UPS truck. Don't come home. What? So, long story is, kid stayed at my house for Thanksgiving. Kid stayed at my house at Christmas time, and some friends, and we managed to get him some other assistance, and he's now graduated from grad school. He's in mental health, but his father has zero contact with him. His mother, a little bit through his brother, and his brother does without dad knowing it. That's fine. That's more than financial abuse, right? But basically what this dad said is, if you're not going to do what I tell you to do at 20 years old, then there's no more money. Now, it wasn't like this kid was off doing drugs or, drinking it up or not going to class. We're talking an A student whose dad wanted to say, you're going to be, and if you don't want to be, then you're nothing to me. And that's financial abuse, right? You can't power and control around the money situation. So it doesn't just have to be that I'm going to take your paycheck, right? So it's a big picture when we talk about that. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse, when we think about sexual abuse in today's time, we often think of date rape situations, those kinds of things, and obviously that's a huge thing and will be a whole separate video unto itself. But sexual abuse is also molestation. It's also degrading women or men based on their sexuality wherever they are, whether it's in a dorm, whether it's at home, whether it's, wherever. We don't often talk about molestation in our society, but we have a serious problem in our country. Really high numbers when you look at other Western countries with child molestation, and obviously we've had a lot of that in the news lately, whether it's from the church organizations. We've had several big prominent stories in the news, obviously with the Catholic diocese in several states. We see it oftentimes in other organizations that involve children that should be safe, right? What I will say about that is a child molester does not look like the scary clown that comes up out of the gutter. They wouldn't get away with it if they did. A child molester looks like the guy that you trust with your children, because that's what they do, is they build that trust, right? What I'll also say about sexual abuse is, we've had a lot in the TV lately about teacher-student stuff. And I see people making jokes when it's a young man with a teacher who's a female. Like, that's everybody's fantasy, whatever. And yet, if it was in the same age and it was a male teacher and a young woman, there's no question that it's not okay. It's never okay. It's power and control. Again, is someone in a position of authority using their position of authority, whether that victim realizes it or not. And so, please, if you see people posting jokes about that, making fun of that, stop it. Say it's not okay. That's not where we are in the world now. Maybe in 1950 it was okay to say something like that, but we're in 2018. It's not okay, and it's never okay. Abusing a position of power is never okay. And so, and what I will say right here and now is that victims of sexual assault and molestation deal with it in their own way. Our national discussion right now is, why would someone wait? Well, people wait for 1,001 different reasons, but it's your job to judge them why they couldn't tell. I got a letter in my messenger just today, and it was from a woman, and she said, why didn't I tell? Why didn't I even tell you? Because you're my friend. I didn't tell you because it was my father, and he was the pastor that most of our friends went to our church. Somebody I've known close to all my life. We're 53 years old. It's hard to tell, especially when you're afraid. When you're afraid you're not going to be believed. Believe survivors, believe victims. Err on the side of that judgment. Protect kids, no matter what. Protect the kids. So, we have physical, we have verbal and emotional, we have sexual, we have financial. The next type of abuse I want to talk about is isolation. Again, when we think of isolation, we think of somebody taking their family and moving them to North Dakota, away from all their friends and family, no phone lines, all this stuff. And that certainly, in the past, was probably the main way people isolated people, was to move them away from their friends and family. Technology changes that a little bit and makes it a little more difficult for that kind of isolation. The biggest kind of isolation that I deal with my college students that I work with and with my Friends Together kids that I have is self-imposed isolation. It's not that somebody says you can't go there, but it's if you do, you're going to hear about it for the next 6 weeks. It's not you can't move that car and go to the store. But if they come home and the car's been moved, you get asked 12,000 questions about it. Self-imposed isolation, these. Boy, let me tell you. People picking up their spouses, their girlfriends, their boyfriend's phone, scrolling through it, reading their text, looking at their email, going in their Facebook. So people feel like I can't have friends because, or I'm going to have to delete or censor everything that's in here. Technology can be a big thing when it comes to isolation. Isolation, another good one. I had a friend, his second wife was, she probably should have been on some medication for sure. And they had a daughter, and their daughter was beautiful. She was a really sweet kid. And every time they went to his mom's house, and he was super close to his mom, she was going to pick a cat fight with his mom. If it was Christmas, I can't believe your mom gave her a brown shirt. I can't believe she cooked turkey again. Can't your mom cook anything else? Whatever it was. Soon it became easier for my friend to back out of family engagements, to sneak to see his mom, whatever it was, because he was going to be in the middle. That's isolation. So it doesn't have to be I'm locking you in the attic, like that book. I can't even remember the name of it, but it doesn't have to be like that. Oftentimes it's self-imposed. So knowing that if your friends are beginning to kind of disappear, making that contact with them, asking a few questions, not a bad idea. Parents, talking to your kids about this stuff before they go to college, super important. Absolutely. But guess what? You need to start talking to them in middle school about it. Our kids are dating earlier. Our kids are getting themselves in situations earlier. And if they don't know what is right and what is acceptable and what are boundaries and how should things be done, then, there can be trouble. What you should know is when we talk about spousal abuse or domestic partner abuse, those kinds of things, the average person leaves 4 or 5 times before they're gone for good. Why do they leave and come back? As many reasons as there are people. But one thing I will tell you is without a solid plan, someone's not going to get away and someone's not going to be in a place that they're safe. If you are married with kids, if you're leaving, you need every important thing you ever had. You need birth certificates, you need shot records for your kids, you need marriage license, driver's license numbers, those kinds of things to get restraining orders, to enroll your kids in school. So what do you do with all that stuff as you collect it? One of the best things anybody ever told me, there was a nurse in my class one time and she said it took her 5 years to leave. But she had gathered all her paperwork early on and had it. But she couldn't hide it. She couldn't hide it in her drawers because he would go through her stuff. And so she took it. She went and bought a big can of Folgers coffee, put the coffee in the canister, put the paperwork in the coffee can, went to her church cemetery, and buried it at the flagpole. Why did she do that? Because she needed to know where it was and she could get it at a minute's notice when the exact right time presented itself. She knew she couldn't go to her sister's house or her mom's house because those were the places he was going to come first. She needed to be able to get her stuff, get gone wherever she was going before he had the ability to find her. If your name is not on something, you can't take it. Years ago, the former sheriff of Highlands County, years and years ago, Steve and I had just gotten married. We'd only been married a short time. My phone rings and he says, "Kathy, I need you to come and pick up 2." I think he told me 2 in the beginning, but it turned out to be 3 in the long run. Anyway, young children, and I need you to keep them. I was like, really? There's no one in your county. I just got married. No, it has to be you. So I go to recover these children. There is a woman, a mother of these kids. She had left her husband, who was an attorney, and they lived in North Georgia. And she had not taken much from the house at all. She had the car loaded with the kids' stuff, and she was headed to someone's house in South Florida. Well, he reported the car stolen. Guess what? Her name wasn't on the car. And so when she got pulled over for something, speeding or whatever it was, she was driving a stolen car. So, again, they weren't going to lock her up, but husband now knows where she is, right? She's not going to be safe. Kid's not going to be safe. So Having a thorough plan, having a little bit of money, if it's just money to buy a bus ticket home to Albuquerque, whatever. People have to have plans. So if you are stuck in a situation where you can't get out for a little while, you need to have a safety plan for your house. The safest room, statistically, the safest room in a home is where? What do you think? Well, according to most studies, it's the master bedroom. Now, if you live in the deep south where I do, sometimes in the master bedroom, in the closet, there's hunting arrows, bows and knives, guns, all that kind of stuff. But master bedrooms are usually carpeted. You can station yourself to fall on the pillows, on the bed. Before everybody had a cell phone, there were landlines, those kinds of things. The most dangerous room, most people say the kitchen. That's a double-edged sword. It's not the most dangerous. The most dangerous is the bathroom. You're like a caged animal. You get in there and you're trapped. Most of us aren't small enough to fit through the little window if there is one. There's metal, there's concrete, there's, razor blades, there's all this stuff, and you're really, truly trapped. Everybody's house is going to be different. So people need to look at their house, figure out in their mind which is their safest room. Second, if there are kids involved, the kids need to be part of the safety plan. If kids are old enough to talk, they need to know. Mom and dad are fighting, you go outside, you go to the neighbors. People say, well, they dial 911. 911 is not in a lot of people's plan. Whether it's because of something they may have in their house that they can't call the police because they're afraid, whether it's they're not legal, whether it's just they're scared of what will happen if they call the police. There's all kinds of reasons. We had a Friends Together kid that was killed a number of years ago. Dad had been in prison, had come home from prison, had been home a very short time, was beating the crow out of mom. Little son, 4 years old, came running out of the bedroom, jumped on his daddy's back. Daddy, 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 stop. Now, dad didn't mean to kill his son. He really didn't. But he went like this. The kid hit the wall, broke his neck, and was dead before he ever hit the floor. If there's children involved, they have to be part of the safety plan. They have to know what to do. If your kids are school age, you have to have a plan that involves the school. When Lindsay and Garrett were little, I had taken their dad's picture. I had it laminated. I took it to the school, and I put it on every custodian card in the elementary school and the middle school that they went to. People will say the custodian knows everybody. They know who should be in the parent line. They know who's walking around the school, all that good stuff. The front office is great, and you put in the front office, oh, this person can't pick up my child, but how many of you been in an elementary school picking up a kid before? There's 12 things going on. You go in, you say, hey, I'm here to pick up Garrett Robinson. He's in Mr. Shelnutt's class. The lady gets on, she goes to get the book. She gets on the microphone. She says, Mr. Shelnut, send Garrett to the office. He's going home with his mom. I'm out the door. Before she ever looks in the book to see who can and can't, Garrett comes running down the aisle, sees you, Mom, boom, car gone, right? So the safety plan has to be all-encompassing. You have to think those things through. People who have a restraining order never stopped a bullet, and if nobody knows about it, it doesn't help you. Years and years ago, I was working for the Department of Health on some special projects, and I was in Bartow. I had an office in Bartow on the 3rd floor of an administration building. Below was HRS, Children's Services, and then vital statistics, all this kinds of stuff, and health department offices in this building. Well, one day I'm sitting in my office, and I hear this man's voice screaming a woman's name who I knew, who was on the 4th floor, thank goodness, down the hall. And I heard people's doors shutting. And basically this man, his wife had left him. She had a restraining order, but she never told anybody. This guy came through security. Nobody knew that he wasn't supposed to be there, right? So if you don't have a plan that involves the whole thing, you're not safe. And if you're trying to leave, you're probably going back. So it's really important. I hope this video helps someone, anyone. We have lots and lots of resources. We're going to be posting those all month. We'll have more videos, and we'll talk about some different issues. So if you have any questions, please Feel free to message us on Messenger, through our Friends Together site. Our Facebook page is Friends Together with a hyphen in it. Our YouTube channel, theoretically, you're probably watching this on our YouTube channel. My email, you can absolutely do that. Email me at hiveducation@aol.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Take care of yourself. Be the boss of your brain.